Buy, play, repair, repeat. All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Top American cultural creations besides Doom. Great recognition from the Washington Post, but what did they overlook?
Insert more coins. A look at the slippery slope leading to becoming an arcade machine collector and repairer.
Long live browser emulation.
And the end of game, along with yelling about the Nintendo Entertainment System, coming up on this week's show for the week of Saturday, the 25th of July, 2026.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech. So in preparing for this week's episode, it occurred to me that typically I am the only person on the show whose last name is not both a verb and a noun. That is true this week as well, as we are joined by Christopher Drum of the Stone Tools blog. Christopher, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here. Good to meet you guys.
We talked about your blog a little bit last year, but to catch people up who are not necessarily This Week in Retro completists, can you give Chris and me a quick rundown of Stone Tools, what you do and who you do it for?
Sure, yeah. So Stone Tools is a retro blog, human written. I feel this needs to be said these days. Human written, human researched, human everything that looks at retro productivity software. So I really focus in on the tools of creation as opposed to the sort of artifacts of consumption, as to kind of put it bluntly. So it's kind of long form. It's very lighthearted. I spent a lot of time, at least 2 to 3 weeks with each piece of software, and I really dig into it. I build stuff with it. I really get to know it. And then I kind of give my report on, is there anything we can learn from it? Are there any sort of forgotten ideas in the productivity space that maybe have been sort of overshadowed over the years by the sort of, the dominance of the Adobes and the Microsofts of the world. So far it's their way or the highway, but it didn't used to be that way. There was a long time where it was a lot of more creativity in that space. And so I'm trying to kind of excavate that. It's sort of an archaeological dig in that regard. The stories also then will kind of bridge into secondary stories where, for example, I did a Bank Street Writer, which is sort of a scholastic word processor for the Apple II. And then that got into a discussion about computers in the classroom as an initiative back in the day in trying to get, computer literacy into the educational market. That covers what I do there. Yeah.
And Chris, do you want to reassure people what you've done with Dave, that he will be allowed to return when your conditions are met?
He will be allowed to return, yes. He's having a well-earned rest whilst we try this format where occasionally when we have a guest on, we might drop a presenter and run the show like that. So, we'll see how we go.
And let's see, my name is Jason. I'm on the show occasionally as well. So I think we've covered all of the basics, and we are now allowed to begin. It has been kind of a weird time, but hey, the United States of America did just turn 250 years old, and there have been some retrospectives, and retrospectives are what we do here. The Washington Post is contributing to the discourse with a very ambitious project called The 25 Most Influential Works of American Culture. A panel of their writers, editors, and outside experts broke things down in 10-year chunks, beginning in 1776, naming one top cultural creation and a handful of honorable mentions in each 10-year span. And as we originally spotted John Romero himself celebrating with a humble, "This one is for all of us," Doom was named the top cultural work in the U.S. for 1986 through 1995, which gets it past honorable mentions, including the television shows The Simpsons, Seinfeld, and The Real World, film Do the Right Thing, and the novel The Joy Luck Club. Now, when I saw Romero's post, I saw him noting that Doom was the only video game included, but then I tracked down the article and looked at the whole thing, and it's the only game, period, even as an honorable mention. Although digging into it a little bit more, the Miss America pageant gets an honorable mention. That is a game of sorts. It is a contest involving some amount of, skill and gift.
Sure, yeah.
But, America, pageants aside, has actually been a tremendous hotbed of game development for centuries, We have a massive board game industry. We're the point of origin and the former world leader in broadcast game shows. We're the birthplace of multiple genres of role-playing game. And the first baseball card got an honorable mention, but not the invention of the game itself, which I also think is a little odd.
That's ridiculous. Baseball is literally one of the 3 foundational objects that are associated with, it's baseball, apple pie, and freedom, or decoration,
or God, or
yeah, exactly.
The third spot, it rotates. But you're right. There's no mention of apple pie either. Well, now I got to start over. But it hit me. Okay, so no baseball, no apple pie. These are also major oversights. But there's not much technology on the list, and we are again a hotbed of R&D. The Victor talking machine, which brought mass affordability to phonograph technology, that does get the prize for the turn of the 20th century. The iPod, which they bizarrely choose to credit only to Steve Jobs, and they do list entities as inventors of other things. So that was a little odd. The iPod is a runner-up for the decade following the turn of the 21st century after Doom. But that's about it. And I get it. This is a general interest piece. They want to keep the art nerds and the poetry nerds and the food nerds and so forth happy too. Everybody needs to get their department. But here on This Week in Retro, even if we don't want to quibble with what the experts picked as the top at every decade, I do think they legit miss some opportunities to recognize the substantial cultural impact of a lot of tech and a lot of leisure innovations, even if we're just going to name check them as honorable mentions. So I'd like to enhance this a little bit with my colleagues here. Even if you don't think that they should unseat the selection, or sure, even if you think it should, I'd like to spend a little time naming some missed opportunities for honorable mentions, which could intersect both tech and culture. One, I've been hammering this game angle for a while. The fact that neither Monopoly nor its predecessor, the Landlord's Game, which was more of a the dark and more politically obvious interpretation of it, those aren't there, and those really came to define an entire genre of here's a thing, you unfold this thing, you move your tokens around for a while, and you yell at everybody at the table. That to me seemed like a pretty substantial miss. And that could have covered, a couple of different decades in the early 20th century.
I can understand that because I think Monopoly is a terrible game.
It's
so bad. So bad. But I understand. I mean, I get from a cultural point of view that maybe it should have some sort of recognition as an honorable mention or something. But it is a really, really bad game, and I'd kind of hate for America to be too closely associated with it in a sense, as an American.
Do you have an alternative to offer?
I do. Price is Right. The Price is Right. I think TV game shows are, if we talk about culture, right?
Yep.
If we're talking about culture and influencing culture, I think TV game shows are, I'm going to use the word great, but I mean it in the sense of like the dictionary term, not I think it's awesome, is a great contribution to culture. It's spread like wildfire across the whole planet. And if we get into like which specific TV game show sort of exemplifies the sort of crystallizes the whole concept most concretely, I think The Price is Right is the one. It is capitalism, the game, right? How well do you know the price of things? Do you know the price of things better than your neighbor? You're a winner. You can strike it big with knowledge that's really pretty throwaway.
Well, what's the worst thing that could happen? You overpay. Don't pay more than it's worth. That's right. The core game mechanic.
That's exactly right. They should add haggling to Price is Right. If you get it wrong, you should be able to like haggle with Bob Barker about trying to get the price adjusted for your. Yeah, never mind.
Okay. No, I like that because I'm a big game show backer, and it no joke, like it was a massive cultural export for decades. We have lost our world leadership, absolutely. And I'm very upset about it.
Yeah,
but for decades and decades, like almost every meaningful game show format in the world originated here.
Yes.
Chris, I don't want to leave you on the sidelines. Did you feel the oppressive thumb of the American game show?
Oh, no, because a lot of the time we had the same game shows, but because they contextualized them for your global region, we didn't realize that I didn't realize that they came from another country. So we had the prices right. I'm trying to remember the name of the host, but it's gone from me. We also had Family Feud, except
Family
we
Fortunes.
called it Family Fortunes. That's right.
Yeah.
Bob Monkhouse, that was the presenter for that. And I loved it as a kid, and I still love it today. We have an Australian version, and it still continues today. I think it's a fantastic show. But yeah, so they certainly came over, and I did not know they were part of American culture. They were just part of our culture, right?
Yeah. Yeah, if you weren't watching to see that little, adapted, license from, Mark Goodson Productions or whatever, you might miss that. The other game that I think is arguably even more of a surprising miss because it remains so relevant and continues to grow is Dungeons and Dragons. And we're talking about something that has gone from being a, niche, faddish, and the panic and whatever in the 80s to now something that people talk about in public and mixed company now with no fear of being bullied, which also is extremely odd. Like D&D's reach is big and keeps getting bigger.
That no fear of being bullied kind of makes me mad because I was bullied for that stuff back in school.
Well, and real talk here. Like at first, I was like, well, everybody should get bullied, and now I'm on the side of no, seriously, you should not talk about D&D this much in public. Don't.
A line has to be drawn somewhere, that's for sure.
Yeah. Another, I think, pretty substantial miss, depending, you could pick your decade depending on which one you wanted to champion, would be programming languages. Most of the major programming languages that either had a major impact or have had a big family tree were created here, and they directly lead to new forms of cultural expression. Yeah, they propagate as things get taught, things are used to make other things. Depending on which one you want to pick. You want to pick BASIC, you want to pick C, you want to pick the long, inescapable arm of COBOL. I think a lot of good prospects there.
Oh, I would go with BASIC, honestly. And in fact, if we had to nail it down, I might pick Microsoft BASIC.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's a good case.
Yeah. Well, John Romero said that his very first program was BASIC, right? 10 print John Romero. On a TRS-80, I think it was, he said. That was probably not Microsoft BASIC at that time, but it was coming. And Microsoft BASIC was, if you turned on a Commodore 64, it boots you straight into Microsoft BASIC, even if it doesn't say Microsoft on the screen. So that was they were almost interchangeable, right? The BASIC for what it means to use a computer were the same thing. And you were dropped straight in, and anybody could just type something 10 print whatever. Anybody could do. Even
anybody can understand what that is.
They can understand it, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a very direct sort of experience to be able to type that, see the computer do what you told it to do, and make that connection of, oh, I'm in control. And that's what bit Romero, was that feeling of, oh, okay, this is not a black box. This is a thing I can master. Even though I'm only doing something very simple right now, I can see the direct line between my thoughts and the thing on screen. And that's something that you really don't get so much these days. Everything's kind of abstracted away from you so much. So I would put BASIC in as a real cultural touchstone. Yeah.
And I said that I was done with games. I lied because I think that omitting poker is very surprising. And we're talking about a game that in multiple forms has had huge cultural footprint across, 19th century to present. Whether it's kind of the core mechanic of any number of thousands of westerns, or the rise of Texas Hold'em poker, which took poker playing and gambling into the mainstream, where seemingly everybody had to have a poker game. Tons and tons of televised tournaments. I would argue, completely off the top of my head, that honestly, the rise of poker probably had more to do with the push to legalize gambling in the U.S. than sports betting, because sports betting is something you can do. There are lots of different workarounds. You could do, fantasy leagues, or we just have a prize pool. That's for this. Whereas poker, it's more straight up like, we're going to run a tournament. We're going to gamble online. I really think that it has such a huge footprint that it's shocking that it didn't at least rate an honorable mention, even if they didn't feel that they could put it tippy top. And then back to sort of the Price is Right concept. I was a little surprised that the notion of commercial broadcasting, whether they chose radio or television, didn't make it, because you can point to a lot of great broadcasters worldwide, but I don't think it's really much in dispute that Americans created and perfected the commercially supported model. And it's also really tough to dispute that that's been massively influential on American and world culture. Think of how many touch or catchphrases you can recite from ads, use those to relate to other people. And yeah, they do in a way make this point by making another point. They give Keeping Up with the Kardashians the top slot for 2006 to 2015. And they quote Ellis Cashmore, author of the book Kardashian Culture, How Celebrities Changed Life in the 21st Century, who calls the show, quote, a brilliant study in how to advertise while leaving viewers convinced they hadn't been advertised to. Viewers were no longer watching celebrities between advertisements. They were watching people whose lives were actually the advertisements, unquote. So in a sense, they're capturing that. But think of, the model that we live in the digital world. How many things are free and ad supported? That all comes directly out of radio and TV advertising, which again is a very distinctly American invention. I know we're running a little low on time here, but I did want to make one case here. For 76 to 85, Michael Jackson's Thriller album, it is a great pick. It's one of the top albums, some of the best music video work of all time. And those are hugely American forms of cultural expression. But I do think, given the world that we live in now, you can have a spirited discussion about the impact of an early console, a personal computer in that spot. What about VisiCalc? Before VisiCalc, there was a notion that decisions in your life were being made by some people who had some numbers, but those people and those numbers were locked away somewhere. You didn't know what that looked like. But democratizing the computer spreadsheet exposed everybody to a world in which decisions are made by profit and loss, or this group benefits and this group loses by it. VisiCalc would be a very obscure choice to make a winner, but I think there's a case. I open the floor to my colleagues.
Yeah, VisiCalc as an honorable mention for sure. There is certainly a pop culture bias to the list, as opposed to like a business culture sort of angle. Sure. Yeah,
understandably.
And, yeah, sure. Yeah, understandably. But yeah, as I'm a VisiCalc stan, as the kids say, and I cloned it for the Pico 8, and I did a story about it for the blog, and I studied it quite extensively. And it's a great piece of software. And when you use it and you think about the time period that it was in, what an earth-shaking, piece of software, and the first killer app, right? And we talk about killer apps all the time now. That's just part of the vernacular. But that was the first one. Somebody had to be first. So yeah, I totally agree with VisiCalc. I'm not sure if given they only picked one thing per decade, I don't know if I can give it a top spot, but I could definitely give it an honorable mention. And then personally, I would also throw one more software honorable mention of Windows 95. That was culturally, that was a big deal. That Start Me Up song was everywhere. Their posters were everywhere. That may be the first, I don't know, Mortal Monday was before that. And
but they kicked in the door to make what effectively is productivity software, to make it culturally relevant.
Yeah, that was the point where any piece of software could achieve those kind of heights. It didn't just have to be a game. It could be anything. If somebody's, financial weight was thrown behind it. And I don't think anybody would have ever suspected or predicted that an operating system would gather that much, steam in the cultural moment. But boy, sure, it really did. And I mean, even now, Windows 95 is a compatibility mode in your Windows 11 right now. So it's stuck around. It really did.
Noted international cultural commentator Chris Winter, what do you got?
I quite like some of the things they did mention. So Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn from 1885. I probably read it a little bit later than that, I think. In fact, I think I read it towards the end of the 80s, if not early 90s, after watching first the TV show, which I actually absolutely loved as a kid. And that inspired me to pick up the book. I don't pick up many books, but that was one of them. Another one, and this does have some technological relevance, The Wizard of Oz, 1939. With that magic of, everybody was used to black and white, and it was a fantastic way of championing the jump into color because you did it mid-movie. When you were in the real world, everything was black and white and how we would expect it to be when watching a movie, and a bit dull and a bit boring. And then when you're in the magical land of Oz, you've got those popping, not just color, but an overflow of color, just really popping, bright, vibrant color, really cleverly done. But I didn't find any mention of the following. The A-Team, Knight Rider, Airwolf, Blue Thunder, Street Hawk, Manimal, or Automan. And look, you may laugh, but again, let's just group them into Saturday afternoon action adventure programs, right? And for us in the UK, and I'm sure it's probably similar here in Australia, that was our understanding of what America was, right? That was where we understood the American culture. You guys are just all out doing burnouts all the time and going full speed round corners and shooting everything, but not hitting a single thing, right? I don't know how you're all such bad shots, but yeah, it was fantastic. So that's for us growing up. That is American culture. So yeah, none of it was listed.
Interesting.
In closing, we do have a bonus nomination via correspondence from Dave. When he learned that I was covering this story, he said that he would like to nominate the American invention of spray can cheese. My immediate response was that I really hoped that the dates were going to line up so that it came from the same decade that Julia Child's book, Mastering the Art of French Cooking, won. And it does. Julia Child won the 1956 to 65 category with her book, published in 1961. Nabisco's spray cheese hits the shelves in 1965, making this a remarkable contrast. I cannot do better than to wrap this all up by saying, God bless America.
When in 2018 I bought an Amiga 500 Batman pack off eBay to relive my childhood, I might have mentioned that before, I honestly thought that was it. That's all I needed. So there's no way it's my fault that I now have 4 real Amigas, shelves full of games, controllers, emulation alternatives, Spectrums, an Electron, and for some reason more Ataris than I can poke a stick at. Or that $35 bargain MAME arcade cab that gets almost daily use in the garage, even if the controls sometimes lock up for reasons I'm still investigating. My fall into this rabbit hole, I think, has been swift, and I blame those stupid YouTubers. But for some, though, it's a slower, more subtle process. Arcade games collecting is not for the faint of heart, it would seem, as detailed in a metro.co.uk piece by accidental collector Tim Keeling. He's written an extensive history, starting with his love for arcades, which began with seaside trips with his fruit machine addicted dad way back at the introduction of video games like Space Invaders. He details how the annual family holiday to Great Yarmouth was his highlight, and he'd run off to the arcades to see the latest releases each year. And I can 100% relate to that, and his love. I just love his description of that period. And in fact, he says, and I'm going to quote, Pac-Man, Missile Command, and Battlezone in 1980, Gorf, Tempest, and Defender in 1981, Robotron 2084, Buck Rogers, The Planet of Zoom, Donkey Kong, Pole Position, and Mr. Do in 1982, Atari Star Wars in 1983, etc. End quote. Just even that snippet of time for me details how fast-changing and exciting those years really were. Leaving school in 1984, he worked for a video rental store, and his boss expanded the business, and that's when he got tempted to buy his first arcade machine, a sit-down cocktail cabinet of Space Invaders that in fact turned out to be a poor Galaxian clone called Defend the Terror Attack on Red UFO. Yep, that's its name. And he scored that for 30 quid, and he had his fun with it, and then he sold it on for 40. Fast forward through his story, and he now owns 11 cabs, some classic, but some really nice niche ones, like an upgraded Space Invaders running Invaders Revenge instead of the original game. I'm not going to list them all because I'd like to go and read the original source material for yourself. But the story has a reoccurring theme: buy, play, repair, repeat. Blown fuses, failed PCBs, dead CRTs, and even machines dying in transit. It's actually a bit scary. Even one that seemed to die as he moved it himself, driving over a sleeping policeman on the way home. Now, to any international listeners that are confused by that, he means a speed bump, not an actual policeman.
Okay, yes, I am an international listener, and I needed that clarification.
Yes, that's what we did in fact call speed bumps. We called them sleeping policemen. I don't know why. Anyway,
do you still call them that?
Probably, or maybe waking policemen. I don't know. I'm not going to get into that. But speaking of confusion, I'm a bit confused by the title of this story because it's How to Become a Golden Age Arcade Machine Collector and Repairman. And my confusion is because as you read through the story, I'm trying to find the bit where he became a repairman. More times than not, it seems the writer had to pay for someone else to do the repair or work the repairs into a trade-in or whatever. He has done some work himself, though, and he sounds a bit like me. He'll have a poke at the easy stuff and then pass it on if something's too hard. And I think that's a fair approach. He talks openly about the UK VAC, or UK Video Arcade Collectors website, for being a great source for not just for buying and selling, but also for help and advice in repairs and for making contact with other people that can do the repairs. So I'll drop a link to that in the show notes as well. So obviously not everyone has room for an arcade cab, never mind a collection, but does this story resonate with your own niche within the technological, thing that we're in? And has the rabbit hole gone deeper than you originally anticipated? Christopher?
Well, I have the collector gene in my DNA. Absolutely. I've done this multiple times. First with a comic book collection back when I lived in North Carolina. And then I started a massive video game and home computer collection and games when I was moved to San Francisco. But each time I had a collection going, I wound up having to move across the country or to Japan now, right? And so I keep divesting of all these collections. And I think it's finally out of my system, basically. So I keep my collection down to maybe like a single box of like the premium stuff that really means something to me. Or I don't know, maybe I'll do something like, look, I'm a Space Invaders fan, so this is my laptop bag.
That's nice.
And it's portable, right? So I can kind of keep a little bit of I can keep that kind of that feeling with me, even though I have nowhere to put a cabinet here, right? I live in a tiny Japanese apartment. So I absolutely love collecting. I go down that rabbit hole very, very deeply, very, very quickly in the past. And now after 3 divestitures of massive collections, I said, okay, that's, I can't do it anymore. Yeah. But I want to.
I was going to say, don't say this to my wife because she's always asking, when does it stop? And now she's got the answer, when we move house. So don't let her know.
Well, I was also very, very broke. I couldn't afford to ship it.
Yeah, fair enough.
I've mostly stayed out of trouble on this front for whatever combination of reasons. I did acquire one classic arcade cabinet in the late 90s. I was able to get a Zybots that was a bit battered. The monitor was going out of I don't know what the thing is when the lines the horizontal lines start to separate. So everything was there. Just there was some bigger gaps in some parts of the screen than others. One of the twist controllers, the snapback bit had broken, so you had to manually reset it. But for $150 plus a U-Haul rental, plus being fortunate enough to have my friend Bohush do 90% of the work to drag it up multiple flights of stairs in my condo building that didn't have an elevator, I was able to enjoy having my own Zybots for a few years. Never learned how to repair the thing. And I've lived in the same place now for coming up on 23 years. So I could have filled them with arcade cabinets if I were so inclined. I think I'm glad overall that I didn't. They're nice to visit. Chris, does this guy get into pinball at all? Because like my understanding is, like there's the difficulties in keeping an arcade cab up and running, and those are not insubstantial. And then there's pinball, and that's just nothing but pain.
He doesn't touch on pinball, but I've heard the same thing, and mechanical, electrical games and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So that's a whole other department.
Yeah. I wonder if I'd be more successful with, even though it is the nightmare that people talk about, I'm more mechanically minded than I am technically minded, if that makes sense. Like, if there's something I can repair with a hammer, a spanner, and a, whatever else. Yeah, I can kind of get into that, and I can kind of understand, well, for that to flow that way, then this has got to hit that and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But
pinball is the thing that if I could, that's what I would want.
Yeah.
I don't particularly need so many of the arcade cabs, but the pinball machines, I understand it's a pain, whatever. I'm just going to ignore all that for this hypothetical, and that is a lineup of pinball machines would be my dream. My dream.
Nice. Even as far as like the early 90s, pinballs had gone semi electronic anyway, hadn't they? You had the score screens that had sub games and all of that. Yeah. So you still got, it's very complex. Yeah. One thing I noted in this story is he states he spent some inheritance money from his gran on a Star Wars arcade cab, and he jokes that his gran probably would not approve. I think, knowing how this stuff clearly makes him happy, I think she would. As for me and my rabbit hole, all his tales of failed machines is a warning not to get sucked in by the idea of having just one, in inverted commas, genuine arcade machine in my garage. But every time I see that side art on Space Invaders, I know it's just a matter of time. Thanks to the Reddit user who shared this wonderful write-up with us, whose name is Jacko6502. Time for housekeeping now, and we would like to welcome back Mike. Thank you for returning with a new annual subscription. And if you'd like to join us on Patreon, and we appreciate everybody that supports us, you can join us on patreon.com/thisweekinretro.
And it was a big week on the podcast reviews front. It looks like the Apple overlords approved some things that had been sitting in their queue for weeks. Please do continue to support the drive for 50 new reviews by submitting your own, and let us know where to watch for it. Jamesy Boy 79 called us the best retro computer game podcast. We will take it. Thank you very much, Jamesy. Yawning Angel, you may have seen various and sundry YouTube videos from, said, myself and Mrs. Y always look forward to catching the latest episode of Twir each Saturday. I like the fact that you described me as having relaxed delivery along with Dave and Chris. So thanks for lying to the folks at home about that. And on the Apple US feed, Chubode said the hosts and their occasional guests deliver such a fun, informative, and thought-provoking show each week. Thank you. I hope that continues for you as well. Thanks to Christopher and all the guests that have joined us in recent weeks. And Chris, you've got some news on your story from last week as well?
I do, yeah, we do. We also have an update from the Centre for Accessibility Australia, who have confirmed that it's the choice of operating system on the Commodore phone that leads them to believe there are major accessibility issues. But again, they're more than happy to make suggestions to Commodore on how to fix these issues. So, Jason?
And it's Sailfish. Are we avoiding talking about what the operating system is?
No, Red Sailfish. Yeah. So, that's from where they get the assumption that there are accessibility issues, from their knowledge of that. So thanks again to Dr. Scott Hollier, CEO of the Centre for Accessibility Australia, for reaching out.
And on to some news in brief. Our top voted news brief this week is the tremendous amount of yelling on the subreddit about the submission from Squelch411 from Metro, the website arm of the UK's Daily Mail, which attempted to commemorate what it originally was calling the 45th anniversary of the Nintendo Entertainment System, which it's not quite that old. And they were using the clickbaity headline, "The NES in the UK, Why There's No Nostalgia for Nintendo's First Console." Now, the yelling was not only about the incorrect date. The first iteration of the NES, the Famicom, turned a youthful 43 this week, but it mostly turned into back and forth yelling about whether or not there is in fact nostalgia, with significant numbers of people lining up to say they did too have an NES in their UK-rific lives, and others saying, no, they were too expensive. Nobody had them. It was all computers until the 16-bit consoles. There sure are a lot of anecdotes about Nintendo ownership and playtime and so forth up there, which makes me wonder if this isn't yet another area in which the very small community of retro tech writers from the UK who have been allowed to define the retro narrative that the NES was unimportant in the UK haven't got another one wrong again.
Yeah, well, the NES was definitely a thing. Yeah, I saw them. I never bought one, just played with the one in Boots.
Well, that was a comment, which actually was pretty funny. Somebody said, like, NES was it was the machine you played with, before then going to the chemist and getting a £2 game, which,
Yeah. Well, it's the game you played in the chemist.
Yeah.
yeah. With the light gun in it as well. They had the whole thing set up. Pajako6502 submitted a Tom's Hardware article about a gamer called Jibril Summer, who created his own cartridge system for a Linux PC running Steam, with some inexpensive secondhand SSDs, 3D printed shells, and a simple monitoring and launch script. The desktop computer responds to the insertion of the cartridge and automatically launches the game.
And our weekly pal Christopher Drum reminded us that the Zilog Z80 CPU has turned 50 years old this week, and that's 50 years in real time, not in metro time. There is a wonderfully Web 1.0 page commemorating it over on the Goliath32.com website. There are a lot of reasons that it's a success, not least of which that it was, and still is, binary compatible with the Intel 8080 processor, which preceded it. So happy birthday to your Spectrum and your CPC and so forth.
And your Coleco Atom, yes.
Oh, we mustn't leave the Atom out of the chat.
My beloved Atom, yes.
And a Korean organization called 2P Game Arcade is sponsoring a new game contest with an early September deadline. The main rules are that data cannot be streamed or downloaded, and the entire game distribution has to fit in 1.44 megabytes, the size of a classic 3.5-inch floppy. There are modest cash prizes for the winners. Thanks to Pajako6502, I detect a pendulum swing for submitting this one. And based on what we saw in a recent episode about just how much you can cram into like 64K and procedurally unroll, like a 1.4 meg game in 2026, that could be astoundingly extensive. So this could get really good.
We could get the whole of Quake in. Game, the retail store in the UK, is apparently pretty much dead, according to a news piece on the northernecho.co.uk, shared with us by Artistic Increase 599. The financial history is in the piece, but the nail in the coffin is cited as the move to digital-first launches and the fact that the company is no longer viable, owing £16 million to its creditors, according to the story. Interestingly, this same week, I read an article stating that GameStop believes the move to digital will have minimal impact, stating that physical games are irrelevant to their business. So, I don't know, it's weird. So while long-time listeners will know that for good reason, there's no love lost between Game and myself, this is still sad news. It's the end of an era, and they were a survivor from the shiny days of gaming glory that were the 90s. And we often wish that our old game shops were still around, and, well, this one was. So here lies Game, 1992 to 2026, probably. Rest in peace.
Also from Pajako6502 as a video that, honestly, I've been dying to bring up on this show. It has been floating around for a couple of years now, but it's called A Day in the Life of a 1980s Kmart Manager. It was created by Lou Urso, who was the store manager of a Kmart discount store in the state of Virginia in 1982. And it is an objectively awesome piece of history. It's a time capsule of the days before retail was revolutionized by computerized inventory tracking and buying. It's got the old school electronics counter that Americans of a certain age are absolutely going to recognize when you get the right angle on it. It's a masterclass in belittling your subordinates on camcorder for the world to then witness 40 plus years later. I absolutely will be referring to this video in future stories about key events in computing and gaming history in the early 1980s, because through this video, you can see what real world retail professionals did and did not care about. So thank you, Pajako.
I did watch some of that video, and it is great. It was better than I expected it to be. And yes, I like the part where he belittles the woman for not having strawberry pie available.
Oh, yes. I'd forgotten about that one. I was mostly thinking of him razzing the other guys, but yes.
Oh, yeah. That was. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He really gets after the cafeteria manager. Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's so good. So good. I feel so bad for her. But I also had forgotten about the cafeterias at the Kmart and how they had a daily special. Man, I had completely blanked that part of the experience. All I remember is the blue lights. Yeah.
And lastly, you can now play Super Mario 64 on your PS1 or your Panasonic 3DO, because I know you've all got one. Thanks to, oh, for goodness sake, it's Bajako 6502.
I knew it. I knew that there was a correction coming, because last week we barely had a mention of him at all. And he is, in fact, the person who fuels the show. But if you would like to compete with him, head over to reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro, where you can submit your own stories and downvote his, maybe. It probably won't matter. We're still going to mostly do what Bajako tells us to do. Something very strange has been happening to the World Wide Web. For years now, even as web browsers have become more and more common, and like seriously, a lot of things that you're told that you're downloading to be a dedicated application are really just a web browser and a funny hat that's running some web browser friendly code. The actual number of web destinations keeps shrinking. And I don't mean like, yeah, there's no end to individual URLs for videos and product pages on e-commerce sites and so forth, but that's not what I mean. I mean the explorable web with lots and lots of different pockets of insight and rambling and discussion, some just a few pages deep. Instead of being a thing that you use to visit a site full of text and graphics and, hey, maybe even an animated bitmap or two, web browsers have become a thing that you run a bunch of code inside of, and maybe it's pulling content from some various other sources. So, Christopher, I mean, we are lucky enough to have a scholar of productivity software on the show. Do you have a take on this? Like, did you notice when applications mostly moved into the browser window, and do you care?
I can't say that I really noticed it. It kind of crept up on me the same, I think it did a lot of people, right? Where one day it's just Google Docs, and then the next thing they've added their Excel clone to it, and then next thing you know, you're in Notion, and suddenly everything you're doing is suddenly on the web. And most of that comes from work, right? Having to do, it's kind of forced upon us in a sense, and at the time you're kind of like just sort of accept it because, well, of course, Google Docs is free and Microsoft Office costs some subscription fee. Of course, they want to save money, and I get it, and then suddenly, next thing you know, your whole life is, all of your productivity life is on the web. And I have mixed feelings about that. I don't, one thing about productivity software on your system that you install locally is they really can't take it away from you, but the websites come and go, and they can shut down and they can change, and that data is not yours, even though you put your name on it, and I would say that we're starting to see some of the unexpected side effects of giving our data over to a lot of these companies kind of blindly. And so I'm less excited about those applications being on the web exclusively. But I get it too. I get it. But there's, I think there's a trade-off, there's a trade-off.
Well, and the good news for retro enthusiasts is that over the past, let's call it 10 years or so, browser-based emulators have become really, really good. So perhaps it's not that surprising that we got 3 different stories about exactly those developments in browser emulators. Lee Odes spotted a post by Andre Weisflog, who was drawing attention to his so-called Tiny Emulators page, which has quick launch emulators for Spectrum, CPC, Commodore 64, CP/M, and more. And there are also dozens and dozens of pre-configured games and demos, with one click, or you can load in software from your local file system. It turned out this page has actually been around for several years, and some of the emulators have limits. There's not full disk image support for the C64 emulator. It just supports tape and single file programs, for example. But for quick start ease of use, it is a very handy collection. So bookmark it if you still remember how to use bookmarks in your browser. Maker Hacks pointed us to a browser-based emulator for the Spectrum Next. Now, that's particularly clever for those of us who have all but given up on actually seeing the Next in our homes.
Soon.
Yeah, sure. I've seen the updates from early July. I'm still not holding my breath over here.
There was another one today, and they're so close. They're so close. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, apparently there have been Spectrum Next emulators in the past, but the best one relies on .NET, which of course runs best under Windows. So now there is ZX Go, an emulator written in the portable Go language, and Chris Garrett of Retro Game Coders has hooked it up to a convenient development environment for Next Basic, Boreal Basic, Z80 Assembly, and C. The article details the process of getting the emulator working properly, but hey, I can verify Spectrum Next has been running on my desk, kind of. even though it's not the one I paid for. Again, this solution is highly tailored for developers rather than those who just want to noodle with an X, but hey, it's a good thing to see all the same. And finally, an article from Time Extension submitted to our subreddit by OKEM894 talking about the next frontiers in browser-based emulation, notably the Sony PSP and the Sega Dreamcast. I will presume this is because their capabilities are similar. I would prefer to think that there's just going to be a push to emulate more machines that have confusing bespoke optical media formats. More seriously, the article is a Q&A between Time Extension writer Nick Rowan and Afterplay developer Patrick Corrigan, and it discusses how Afterplay, which is an emulator service that optimizes to run emulators on the Safari browser on iOS specifically. Presumably Patrick knows how this stuff works best and what's coming next. Right after the PSP and Dreamcast prediction, he mentions that doing PS2 emulation in browser will be another step function up in difficulty, and also is looking forward to the potential for making browser-based emulation more of a shared gaming experience. And not to leave you out, Chris, our sometimes IT support professional type, have you noticed browser-based everything making life better or worse for the IT professional?
From the IT perspective, not really. I mean, I guess from one perspective, like I've never bothered setting up virtual machines, for example, and these days I feel I don't have to because you can just jump into another system in a browser. In terms of Office functionality and whatever, I think it's fine. I subscribe to the whole model where you just know that as long as you log in with the same account, your same data comes to you no matter where you are, what machine you've logged onto. What does worry me is I have heard some horror stories where people think that their files, their personal files, are safe in whatever cloud-based system they've chosen to use, and when they actually come up against a problem is when they suddenly think, actually, I wouldn't mind an offline backup of this, and that seems to be when things go right. Now that could be, user error in those instances, but I've heard stories of people. That's when they actually lose stuff, is when they think they're backing it up locally. So that's not a pleasant thing. Gaming wise, though, funnily enough, that's actually the side that interests me more. BBC Micro Emulator is probably one of the first things I tried online, and was shocked at how well it worked. So that was, I think, via archive.org and some other places as well. And in fact, there's one BBC emulator where it has a 3D BBC Micro with a full Cub CRT. And you can rotate the view even to the point where you can get the screen glare from the light behind you. So, so you can get migraines from the emulation if you really want that. And of course, I loaded up Sphinx Adventure, Jason, to try that one out. So that was good.
There's so many other games that are less terrible.
Brilliant fun. Most recently, someone dangerously made me aware of retrogames.cc, which has thousands of console titles and original arcade ROM titles, all playing within the browser with customizable controls. And the controls seem to stick when you leave the site and return on another day. As long as it's the same computer and browser you're logging in from, your customized controls seem to hang around. But I couldn't get sound to work on that one. So today I also found retro-games.org. I could get the sound to work on that, and it's pretty much has the same features and the same interface as the other one. Not that you'd want to have that around for, so you can have some quick outrun practice during work time, because that would be wrong just because you're in a high score challenge. But with all of these sites, specifically like the thousands of ROM sites, just be aware of the ads, and be aware of ads over the top of the play area before you actually click in to play the game that look like it's prompting you to download the game. It's not. And in fact, in small print, it says it's going to download a new browser. I wouldn't trust that. So, yeah, just be careful. You know what it's like, standard web caution.
I just had some thoughts about from a productivity software point of view, the kind of stuff that I work on. I've not had good luck with the browser-based emulators and like data transfers. For example, like things that I'll kind of work on are stuff like I'll build something in VisiCalc, and now I need to bring that over into Lotus 1-2-3 from the Apple II to the PC running DOS. And I'm not really sure how to get my stuff out of the emulator. I looked at, like today I took a look at, it's called infinitemac.org, where they have every Macintosh operating system known that ever existed, including Next, and I think Lisa I wonder if Lisa's on there. I'm not sure. And there seems to be some mechanism in there for interfacing with, it says the real world. It didn't do anything for me. I couldn't upload, I couldn't download, I couldn't get anything. So my files seem to be locked in there. It says something about there's a shared gigabyte storage space, but they don't make any guarantees that they'll keep it. And I need guarantee. I can't. If I'm going to spend time writing a document, I cannot risk that thing just being thrown away at the whim of the browser. So I really do prefer for productivity workflows, I prefer the local setup. I can drag and drop stuff between the Amiga and DOS, and it doesn't matter. I can just, files go here and there, and then I bring it over into Affinity, or I bring it into the blogging platform. And it's a very seamless experience. I've built a very nice, everything's, all the hard drives are just folders. So you can just pull documents that are across. And so you get this really nice sort of network of vintage hardware, and you can share your documents. It's very nice for that kind of work.
I do mourn Web 1.0 quite a bit, and maybe it could and should have been possible to have the best of both worlds, the rich media code-heavy experiences and the wide open, citizen web. But I am pretty pleased by what we can actually accomplish in browser these days, because it feels like only yesterday that opening a PDF actually inside the browser window was like a 50-50 shot to crash the whole thing.
It's time now for our community question of the week, and last week's question was, who would you invite to your virtual retro arcade? So we're out of contest mode. Christopher, do you want to read out the top answer for us?
I'd be happy to. The top answer comes from Jeff Mendoza.
His bot network is working again.
He's only got 6 bots, though.
Well, he won. I guess the bots are working. Chris, Dave, and Jason. The only machine in the arcade would be Outrun. They're locked in for 4 hours. Jason will learn to love Outrun.
Yes. Love it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Now, I will tell you, I booted up Outrun on that game site link that you gave us. And like you said, no sound on that. You don't need to learn to love Outrun, Jason. It's fine. It's a fine game.
Thank you. More validation from guests. I like this.
Ian
Lee, now Christopher Drum. This is helpful. Speaking of friends, Colony Activist submitted my friends shrug emoji, if I had any. Weepy face. Yeah. Boy.
We'll join you.
He needs more bots.
Yes, he does. It does. It's Mythyroid said, Dave said alive or dead, so I'm off to the cemetery to dig up some random bodies. What? Nothing about why he wants them in the virtual. It's a virtual arcade, mate. You don't need to dig up their bodies.
Yeah, and thank you, Reddit algorithm, because with the same number of votes just below that, SDMat22 has the correct answer. I'd take my dad.
Aww.
I still remember my first ever video game experience with him. Yeah, nothing about digging up bodies.
No.
What about a beloved family member with whom you enjoyed arcade time? This is what we're going for.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, that's much nicer.
And he also mentions pole position, so he does cover the racing game content. So the wholesome content for me, the racing game content for Chris. Everybody's
fantastic. Yeah, that's good. Any other standout answers?
I liked it. There were a couple that name checked Tron and/or Last Starfighter. I appreciated that.
Yeah. I thought Happy Coding ZX. I liked his answer or their answer. The only possible answer is Eugene Jarvis and Jeff Minter. So Robotron fame and Llamatron fame and Tempest 2000.
Yeah, Farm Animal Bothering fame.
Games of all time. Anyone who says otherwise is wrong. That is correct. That is the correct answer. The correct answer is the creators of the games, I think.
Yeah.
That's who I want to play the games with, is the people who influenced all of that and how I want to see them play against each other and have them bounce ideas off of each other. And I think that would be great.
Nice. Well, there are lots of other good answers, some are really making me giggle, so do take time to go check it out. And also to participate with this week's question of the week, which is, Fact of life. Retro tech needs repairing. What repair skill would you like to upgrade? Or if you're already a master, what skill do you wish you could teach to others? Let us know. Where would they go, Jason, to let us know?
And it would go to reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. Community question of the week is typically stickied right to the top of the blog there. And while you're there, you can upvote, downvote, comment, even submit some stories of your own, or just let Pajaco do all of the work.
I'm going to start taking some initiative.
We had a lot of great submissions this week. A lot of things that if we were a 2-hour show would have made it into news briefs and so forth. So thank you all for that, and thank you for watching this episode of This Week in Retro. Christopher, thank you for joining us after a while on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was great fun.
We'll probably have the regular band back next week unless something else surprising happens. Who knows? Who can say? Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. We're all waving.
Sure.
Or we waved. Or we put a hand up.
Yeah.
Bye.
This Week in Retro was written and presented by Chris from 005 AGIMA, Jason from the Retro Adventurers, and Dave. It was edited by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcast app, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/thisweekinretro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. Please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.